All right, everyone, I think we can go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Thank you for joining us for the Pathways to Social Entrepreneurship session for eFest Careers. My name is James Creel, and I'm the Senior Program Manager for ASME, and I'll be your moderator for this session today. First, I want to introduce and thank our esteemed panel of speakers, Ms. Maggie Flanagan, Program Officer at the Lemelson Foundation, Ms. Shilpa Malik, CTO of Bioscan Research and one of our ASME iSHOW India winners for 2020, and Mr. Austin McLean, CEO and lead engineer from Corridor Water Technologies and an ASME iSHOW USA winner for 2020 as well. My primary focus at ASME is social entrepreneurship and training of social entrepreneurs through the ASME Innovation Showcase, or the iSHOW. If you're not familiar with the iSHOW is a hardware-led social innovation accelerator focusing on the hardware entrepreneur ecosystems in India, East Africa, and the United States. iSHOW essentially sits at the nexus of engineering and technical due diligence, social and environmental impact, and hardware startups. We seem to be kind of living in an era of brightly colored apps that are easily coded, easily scaled, and generally flush with lots of investment capital because of the idea that there's a very quick return on investment. But that's not the case for the hardware entrepreneurs. Their journey to market is much more difficult. The iSHOW Accelerator engages with our annual cohort of winners and startups for about a year, and we help them navigate some of the challenges that they can expect to face on their hardware journey to get them to their next stage of development as quickly as possible. With iSHOW's network of experts that we've built over the years, we designed, tested, and validated what we call the Design and Engineering Review Framework that consists essentially of 4 areas that we believe all hardware entrepreneurs will need to focus on and be familiar with if they're going to be successful. And those 4 areas are the customer and user knowledge, the hardware validation and prototyping, the manufacturing optimization, and lastly, the implementation strategy and building a sustainable business. So we believe that the engineer of the future will certainly need to have that entrepreneurial spirit. Over the years, the iSHOW has helped over 160 startups in 28 countries and has doled out over $800,000 in seed grants, design services, consultations, travel stipends, and business development assets to help them succeed in the long term. So from the agricultural innovations, the medical devices and diagnostics, clean water and sanitation, to the clean energy technologies, iSHOW finalists over the years have addressed nearly all of UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And over the years, we've had a number of undergraduates who were looking to build a sustainable business model around their senior capstone projects. So if you have a prototype that you're looking to build a sustainable business around, then the iSHOW might be a great opportunity for you. And we'll be opening up our 2021 applications in January. So please be on the lookout for that at www.asmeishow.org. I'd like to now turn it over to Maggie Lemelson to discuss the mission of the Lemelson Foundation. Maggie, if you please.
Thanks, James, and thanks to the team at ASME that puts on eFest. Excited to be here to tell you a little bit about the Lemelson Foundation and about my work, and hopefully share some insights with a lot of young engineers that are interested in some of the same problems that we are. You can go ahead and advance slide. So the Lemelson Foundation is a private family foundation based in Portland, Oregon. Our mission is to improve lives through invention. And we work in the US and then we also work in a limited number of low and middle income countries. Our work in the US is a little bit skewed towards support that aims to cultivate the next generation of inventors through educational experiences. And our work in low and middle income countries that I focus on is a little bit more focused downstream on the actual inventions and invention-based enterprises. You can go ahead and advance. So we've had 25 years to define what we mean by invention. And we even came up with the term inventing impact at one point to try to distinguish what we aim to support. Core to our definition is that we look to support invention that is from its earliest stages of, problem definition and setting the design parameters, aiming to solve a societal problem. We also care that it considers environmental impact and that it plans for a commercial trajectory, because we think this is a key factor in terms of achieving sustained impact through invention. We also explicitly focus on physical invention, which is often hardware. And that's because we think it's necessary. So are software and business process innovation in our minds, but we notice that unless there's some intentional consideration of hardware when designing the support services and educational experiences, that hardware is often overlooked and hardware-based businesses are often underserved. You can go ahead and advance, James, thanks. So we do not invest or make grants directly to invention-based enterprises. I manage our work in India and East Africa, where we spend time understanding the challenges that invention-based enterprises face when they're developing products or validating technology and markets and launching and scaling enterprises. And these challenges often fall into a few different categories, like policy, talent and expertise, market, finance, and facilities. So we work in India and East Africa because there's this balance of a significant need for these inventions and capacity that supports them, and where there's also a huge opportunity for invention-based enterprises to have impact. But there's also a base level of momentum and systems that support entrepreneurship and innovation. So we support organizations that are often incubators, seed funds, networks, and training institutions that make up the supportive structure for invention-based enterprises in these markets. And our aim is to reduce barriers and see more of those companies succeed. I'll end there and look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you for that, Maggie. We'll save some questions for the Q&A session here shortly. With that, I'd like to introduce Ms. Shilpa Malik of Bioscan Research. Shilpa, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you, James. Hello, everyone. So I'm so glad to be here with the young engineers and the non-engineers who are thinking of taking up technology innovation. So, to go right into Bioscan research, we are developing a non-invasive brain hemorrhage detector that can detect an intracranial bleed on the site within 2 minutes. Now, what is this problem of brain hemorrhage detection, and why are we solving this? So when we started researching about the problem, what we identified was more than 50 million people around the world suffer from traumatic brain injury, and only 35% of them come back to normal life, not because of lack of treatment, but delay in detection. Yeah, can you go to the next slide? Imagine a scenario where a paramedic staff is screening a trauma patient who has no external head injuries and no apparent symptoms. Very, very bleak chances that he would be referred for a CT or an MRI scan. That's where we come in. Yeah, next slide, please. So we equip the paramedic with our device Cerebro. It's a very small device, like the size of a hair dryer. It's based on optical technology, where we are using light that can penetrate skull to detect bleed. It's battery operated, so you can take it to the site itself, and it's very easy to use. So just switch on, select location, scan, and you're done. The result is displayed in terms of graphical colors. So the green indicates normal, red indicates hemorrhage, so refer for a CT scan. Yes, next slide, please. So where, who are the potential beneficiaries of our device? First of all, this device would make a difference at the first response site itself by making the triaging of patients. So, whenever a patient is reaching a response site like a trauma center or an independent clinic or a diagnostic center or even an ambulance, there is always this dilemma, which all tests should be done. So there is a protocol which is followed today, but unless there is an injury to the head and the symptoms are not there, the person is not taken for further tests for head injuries, as I mentioned earlier. So our device would do it objectively, and that's why it would be more accurate and quicker triaging. So, there will be no delay, and we will not wait for the symptoms to come in the patient. The second beneficiary are the injury prone sites where the injury is likely to happen. So like in case of defense, in impact sports, when this device, we would schedule a monitoring of these people after every event, and then it can identify whether there has been any hemorrhage or not. The third potential beneficiary would be the insurance companies. So the early the detection, the lesser the money that the patient has to pay, and so lesser the burden on the insurance company. So I think this would help all these guys. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Shilpa. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Austin McLean, CEO and lead engineer of Corridor Water Technologies.
I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Hi, everyone. My name is Austin McLean, and as James said, I'm the lead engineer for Corridor Water Technologies and also a recipient of the 2020 iSHOW winners. And today I'm going to present to you our passive irrigation controller for efficient water use in low-income countries. So I'm first going to start with the motivation and end user. So meet Juan. Juan is a small-scale farmer who lives in the town of Pedro Arauz in rural Nicaragua. And he's installed a simple drip irrigation system on his farm. He uses this to grow crops for his personal food as well as some small profit. You can see the example of his irrigation system on the photo on the top right. It's the 2-liter pop bottle that's been emptied and filled with water, and he has a syringe head that's been poked through the end, and that slowly allows water to drip to the roots of the plants. And to fill this water refill this system, he uses a pump or a diesel pump, which is shown in the bottom photo. And he'll pump water up from a well using diesel fuel, and he'll basically refill these once a day. But Juan is not an expert farmer by trade, and he doesn't have any idea of how much water the plants actually need. And Juan is not the only farmer with these issues. In the nearby areas around where he lives, there are farmers who farm rice and they drain the local aquifer. There's a lack of nearby rivers and lakes, and there's an ever-expanding dry season that is causing water to be more and more scarce. So Juan, along with many other farmers in rural Nicaragua, suffer from lack of water and really need a product that could improve water efficiency, especially where growing crops is important. So that's where our project comes in. So this is the passive irrigation controller. This is the image shown on the right, just a quick schematic photo of it. I'm going to run through a quick actuation on how it would work and how it could provide a benefit to these farmers. So you would take a valve like this and you would install it between the water storage tank and drip irrigation lines running to all the crops. This will be planted into the soil. The tip in the soil is a tensiometer tip, and this allows the water to be exchanged through this membrane at a very slow rate. The tensiometer tip would allow the soil and the water chamber, which is shown on the right of the valve, the big system that's filled with water. It'll allow that to equalize. So as soil dries, it actually generates a negative suction pressure. And this pressure would be able to be captured inside that water column by the tensiometer tip. Once it gets dry enough, the pressure inside will reach a certain threshold value and it will start to pull the piston backwards into the water column. This will overcome the spring force, which you can see on the left side of the model. And it will allow the piston to slide back, as I said before, and this will unkink the tube, which is shown. And this will allow water to flow through the valve and out into the field and water the crops, as well as the valve itself. When the field starts to saturate with water, it'll be sucked back up into the valve, and this will decrease the pressure, and eventually the springs will take back over and pull the piston back and kink the tube, causing it to shut. So this entire process is very efficient, as it will only actuate on and off when that threshold value is reached. So this accounts for things like rain and weather conditions. It also requires no external energy input, so no form of electricity is needed for this entire process. We've calculated that this could potentially save Juan and other farmers up to 75% of the water they're currently using to water their crops. And there's just some general motivation on the impact that this type of product could have in this area. So on the site, for 50 breakthroughs, it's a site that basically lists topics that currently have or would have a large impact on many people. One of the topics is a low-cost system for precision application of agricultural inputs, ideally combining water and fertilizer. This product would fit perfectly into the precision application of water, as it's very efficient and requires no external energy. So it can be used anywhere on the globe as long as they have soil and crops to grow. And just some of the key impacts that could be highlighted with this, as you can see below, it would increase the access to food for around 1 billion people and generate new income for around 10 million people. worldwide. And just to end, we sort of went through our community that we worked with when we were down there, and we're looking at the benefits. And we saw that it could benefit not only the people within the community, but there's also a lot of other factors that would impact. So the way that the families generally work is the fathers will go out and work sort of trade jobs, and they'll leave the mothers at home to work on the farms as well as raising the kids. This would alleviate a lot of the labor that is needed to water the crops, allow them to spend more time with their kids or growing more food. And this in turn would increase gender income equality amongst the families in this area, while also providing them with proper nutrition as they have higher access to food. I'm going to end it there, but feel free to ask me any questions that you may have in the question period.
Thank you for that, Austin. And just a reminder to all of our participants, if you have any questions for our panelists here, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom menu. I'd like to circle back to Maggie Flanagan right now. Maggie, what trends are you noticing on the ground, and what do you see for social entrepreneurs focusing on hardware innovation over the next decade as we approach 2030? And what advice might you have for students specifically that are interested in pursuing social entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I would say that since the pandemic became a reality for us all, that regional resilience has been a massive theme globally. National and subnational governments are concerned about the resilience of their health systems, their supply chains, their manufacturing capacities, and more broadly, their economic resilience and their ability to overcome chronic and acute development and disaster needs related to climate change and as well as this current health pandemic. The Make in India campaign and other buy local campaigns, I think, have only grown in momentum. And there's an opportunity for social entrepreneurs focused on hardware in particular to think more creatively about decentralized and disaggregated manufacturing, those processes. And I think there's actually opportunity for invention in the machinery that is part of manufacturing and supply chains. And for companies that have business models and technologies that can leverage those trends. Another byproduct has been political will, which is mobilized to reduce a lot of the barriers to innovation in both government processes and policies for regulation and procurement in particular. So for the first time, you started seeing governments actually prepaying on purchase orders related to essential services, which really transformed opportunities for companies in India in particular that are typically struggling to get working capital to deliver on orders, and then frequently waiting months to actually get paid, which crushes these cash constrained early stage companies. The other big trend I'd say is climate change adaptation. Just in the past year, I've seen a lot better work to come up with consistent definitions around adaptation and better, we're getting close to being able to evaluate and sort of compare opportunities. And so I think that ultimately is going to unlock a lot of resources to support companies that can demonstrate an adaptation value proposition. As far as people on the call today and advice for students and young professionals, I think that there's a overemphasis on this rhetoric around a hero entrepreneur. There's immense opportunity to add value in support of the system. And that's for people who might recognize that they don't have the mindset or other characteristics specific to starting a company today. But it's also a great way for people to gain perspective and better familiarity with problems to better prepare them to start companies or participate in startup companies. So working for consultancies and that do design work focused on solutions that have social impact, or even gaining multidisciplinary experience like finance to accompany your engineering experience and expertise. People that have a technical background and can evaluate risk related to technology development. Those are incredibly valuable in teams that manage investments into these products and something that we're constantly seeking and struggling to find, frankly, in the early stage investment sector. So personally, I'm not an engineer, but I worked for a technology-focused incubator early in my career, which was really helpful in giving me hands-on experience prior to actually working to launch an enterprise. And that incubator gave me exposure to a portfolio of companies over a number of years to see what are some of the common mistakes that get made. And it honed some of my own entrepreneurial skills and really like generalist knowledge, which I see as a useful step, that generalist knowledge becomes really useful when you're in a startup where you're doing a lot of diverse tasks and sort of need a little bit of everything. So yeah, that would be my advice is think about how you can gain experience in the sphere, even if you're not ready to like start a company today. And there's a lot of exciting and rewarding work there. And it can also contribute towards a path that it ultimately ends in entrepreneurship as well.
Great, thank you for that, Maggie. Appreciate that guidance and those recommendations for the young engineers that are here. I wanted to circle back to Austin. Austin, we're seeing actually many programs rising within academia that are focusing on design and engineering for social impact. Your research that led to the passive irrigation controller came out of the University of Toronto's Center for Global Engineering program. Can you talk a little bit about some of the research priorities defined by this program and the types of innovations that are coming out of this program, and what advice might you offer to engineering students, researchers, and early career engineers that might be thinking about going down this similar path?
Yeah, sure. So some of the main projects, I guess, coming out of CGEN, which is the Center for Global Engineering at the University of Toronto, this year we have currently projects ranging from a PVRO system, which would be solar powered and provide clean drinking water for people in lower income countries, to turbine designs, which would be used to replace pressure reducing valves and systems such as buildings or dams. And it would allow like that energy to be harvested instead of just wasted as it is currently. So the projects range from a variety of things where some have more social impact than others, but I'd say generally they're all sort of green energy focused designs, which have been really interesting. Our design came out originally as a like we're going to just make a rough design and sort of send out the design to lower income countries and hoping that they would be able to adapt it and change the design. But we soon realized that the variability of that would cause a lot of failures. So we decided to move it into a product space to offer it to people there that would provide a better solution, the more consistent solutions that they know how it works, they could implement it easier and everything. So I'd say that was the sort of transition point, is when we realized that if this is actually going to work, we need to make it more consistent and offer a consistent level of design and like expertise to these people to make it work. So yeah, and I'd say for some advice for people that are thinking of this space, there are a lot of I guess areas I would say are untouched. Like one of the things that I noticed in my undergrad is just that there are a lot of sort of missing links between, I guess, like a lower income country and sort of a technological need that they have. So for example, a valve that you could have here in Canada would just be like a simple sensor that actuates on and off based on that value. But in another country where they don't have readily available electricity, it's very different, right? So you have to sort of think of different solutions, and you can find these sort of niche, interesting solutions in areas that no one's really thought of before. And I think that's the key or most important thing when you're going into this space, is just sort of having an open mind and being really creative with your designs.
Great, thank you for that, Austin. Over to Shilpa Malik now. Shilpa, one pathway for social entrepreneurs to secure much needed funding and exposures through startup competitions. Bioscan Research has gone through the competition gauntlet with many successes all over the world. Is there a secret to your success at these competitions? Can you please share some insights on how to successfully present or pitch your startup to diverse audiences and investors? And what are some of the biggest challenges that you and your peers have faced? And how might you advise entrepreneurs to kind of navigate some of these challenges that you've faced over the last couple of years?
Sure. So I'll start with, the pitching question. So one of the interesting things that we figured for funding our startup was, participating in the challenges. It gave us the funding mostly as a non-dilutive fund, and also it gave us access to a pool of mentors who were very relevant for us at different stages of journey. So like, now we are part of ASME, we are getting mentors for sustainability, we are getting mentors on design. So there are things, apart from monetary, there are, in kind, or especially the mentorship which you get as a social entrepreneur. As an engineer first, when I wanted to get into social entrepreneurship, I think one thing which I've realized over a period of time is the impact of partnerships. So the kind of people that you're able to identify and work with from the very beginning really makes a difference. For example, even to build a technology product, the team that you need over and above that, if it is socially relevant or to make it affordable, you have to think about so many things from the very beginning, whether it's business model innovation, whether it's the financial sustainability of the startup. So I think as you start this journey, there is so much fear around how to get everything done. But over a period of time, if you identify that if I'm going to get into this field, I would need maybe help on this, and identify people around, or if you're meeting friends, find a way to get them in, support you through this. I think that is the only way to we have survived through this. So, and that's one thing I would like to say. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that, Shilpa. One of our questions from our participants that just came in, there's a lot of talk about social entrepreneurship and hardware ecosystems in emerging markets, in India, East Africa, and things like that. But is it possible to engage in social impact projects in Canada or the United States? How might folks get involved in North America? And I want to open this up to all three of our panelists here, if you have any insights.
So I can start probably. So there are bilateral programs which are available for India, Canada, India, US, India, Israel. And there is a particular website, Geeta, in India, which gives access or which gives information about this. So Indian entrepreneurs who want to partner with, researchers or even other entrepreneurs around these countries can identify the programs that are active and what is the eligibility criteria. And probably that is one of the ways that we have found a formal way to engage with, whether it's research institutions or fellow entrepreneurs or startups in different countries around the world.
Great, thank you for that, Shilpa. Maggie, did you have any insights on that? I know Lemelson focuses very much at the local level in Portland as well. Stateside, I was wondering if you could provide any insights on how to engage in social impact in the United States.
Yeah, I think, so I wasn't sure whether, the question was sort of where Shilpa was going in terms of like ways to engage in other countries or locally, but I would say both are very viable. And I think, on a local basis, like there's immense societal problems to overcome in the US and Canada and other countries as well. And so no shortage of opportunities there. I think it's looking for, I think what's important is that you identify what are the problems that you care the most about, and that you can gain some sort of access to the communities that are part of it, the experience and perspectives of that problem. I think the foundation loves to quote, I think it's Albert Einstein, that's like, if the world was about to end and I only had an hour, I'd spend like the first 50 or 55 minutes examining the problem and then the last 5 or 10 designing. And so I think it is about like finding the social issues that are important to you, that you feel some level of connection to, or that you can establish relationships with those stakeholders that are all part of that problem. And that's going to go a long way towards designing effective solutions. And so whether that is locally and that, you know, in the US, I think, James, when you talk about our programs in Oregon, we have a lot of programs that actually connect with tribal communities that are also sort of underserved in terms of people intentionally designing for their needs. But it is also like just helping students connect with like their immediate community and vicinity. And that does often in our work lead to programs that are focused on environmental issues, because those are very prevalent today. So there's that. And then I'd say internationally, it's, I think it's really important, if you're going to work on problems that are not proximate, that you connect with people, as Shilpa recommended, that have some ownership of that problem, so that if you're plugging in on a project basis to lend some short-term expertise, technical capabilities, whatever it is, that it's not wasted. You want that work and energy to endure. And so identifying these kinds of platforms to matchmake you with entities that are going to own that problem and continue to work on it beyond your project-oriented interest, I think is really important. And Austin, maybe, I mean, given your experience, you might be the best suited to this.
Yeah, I was, thank you for that, Maggie. I was just going to circle back to Austin to see if he can provide any insights on this as well. And I know a lot of the projects that were coming out of University of Toronto's Center for Global Engineering program, you know, from pond aeration for fish farmers focused in Southeast Asia. And Austin, I know you're piloting currently in Central America. But as engineers in Toronto, how, you know, what inspired you to focus on social impact abroad, and what advice might you offer to folks that are, you know, stateside or in Canada that would want to pursue something similar?
Yeah, I guess the motivation for a lot of the CGen work is, I guess when people do go abroad for these trips, like in my undergrad, I actually had my final design project was a trip to Nicaragua. So we had to make like a windmill to pump water down there, and we designed it and then went down and built it with the community. But then when you're down there, you get very inspired by just noticing things where it's like, oh, I think this could be done better, or like this is like an interesting area where more design work could take place. So I think that's sort of the main driver for a lot of these projects, is when you actually like work with these communities and everything, you think you can like just think of all these potential solutions that might be like just or have a great impact on them socially. But that doesn't mean that you can't find stuff within Canada or the US. Just even recently in Canada, there was a whole, I'm not sure if it's turned into a design challenge, but I know there's certain like areas that still have a like boil water advisory based on where people live, and they're still sort of struggling with getting like clean drinking water to these areas just because they're more remote. So even like within Canada, there are still some like pockets that definitely do need like more design work, or could benefit from social impact. So I feel like it might seem a bit more difficult, but there's always, like, as long as you can find it, there always is a design or problem that you could try and solve even within Canada and the US.
Great, thank you for that, Austin. I wanted to ask all three of our panelists, you know, how is the COVID pandemic impacting your ventures? What are some of the challenges that you're currently facing, and how have you kind of navigated through those? As if it wasn't hard enough, you know, we throw a pandemic on social entrepreneurs' plate as well. So I was just wondering how have you navigated some of those choppy waters over the last 7 or 8 months?
Yes, so maybe I can start. So for us, it has, the pandemic actually, so we were supposed to, launch our product in March. And, when we placed the order, everything was fine. But in March, the vendor declined, and not just declined, by April, they said that they won't be making it anymore. And so we had to go back and make some design changes to our product, which you understand, at a miniaturized hardware level, it involves so many things. So I think that kind of as a pandemic, our depend. So when there's a, I mean, this is a great thing to talk about, like the dependency of countries when we are making a product, like how how it changes. It really impacts sometimes your product at a very small scale. So that's what I think, one of the things that happened to us, which we never anticipated. And secondly, even the deployments, if you see, people are very wary. In fact, not all the healthcare, especially because we are from healthcare, not all hospitals have opened up now to new devices and new deployments. So that also is becoming kind of challenging. If it was normal, then people are more open to explore, to test new products. Now all of a sudden it's more restricted. So the whole thing is like taking much more effort. So I think that's how it's affecting us. But on a positive side, I think the whole team kind of got to introspect, and we came out with some of the things, with some of the tools that we had designed internally. Now we can open up to the some of the researchers or student researchers for development of, say, let's say, optical devices. So I think some positives and some challenges.
Great. Austin, I saw you smiling when I asked that question. Can you delve a bit deeper in that? For instance, how might this have impacted your testing and validation in any field trials that you had on your plate?
Yeah, so originally we're at the prototyping phase, so we've actually built the valve and we've been sort of operating it within a greenhouse. And then at the time of around March, we were trying to test it in the greenhouse, but I didn't want to leave it unmonitored because, again, back then everything was very unsure and we didn't know what was going on. So I ended up sort of taking it out of the greenhouse and making like a pseudo setup for it in like my basement back home with my parents. So I actually was running tests for the prototype in my basement just so I could see it every day. So, but actually out of that was actually like possibly some of the best like results we've gotten recently, just because it helped me understand the design better, because I was around it like all day. I could just walk down and take a look at it, and when soil's drying and anything can happen, it was like definitely a good experience. But yeah, since then we've moved back into the greenhouse, and I guess the current issues we're facing now today would be the like mainly the manufacturing in Nicaragua. We're trying to work with the suppliers and talk with them, but recently down there, it's been really difficult to talk with people, because like the entire country, they're telling them to like essentially not interact with anyone. So it's very difficult to reach out and sort of talk with the manufacturers, suppliers, and even just people in the community. So we've sort of been struggling a bit with that, but we're hoping going forward it will change a bit, and we'll actually be able to send down some prototypes and have them work with some farmers as like early adopters in the coming months.
Great, thank you for that. Maggie, just circling back on your talk, you indirectly supporting systems sounds a lot more complicated than just supporting hardware companies directly. How do you measure success on that? Why do you focus on kind of building that infrastructure for all social entrepreneurs to thrive? And how do you measure that success?
Yeah, it definitely makes our jobs more difficult. And I think the point is that if we were just supporting, like, one, we're based in Portland, Oregon, right? So like the ability to directly support enterprises in India or East Africa, we're not the best suited to do that. We're not going to be the most effective at doing that. And because we think that there should be like enduring institutions and organizations that are local, that are better at doing that, and that they actually make the entire market more efficient at supporting these kinds of companies. And part of that is because we have till 2030 on the current sustainable development goals we're sort of in a sprint mode to try to address those, and technology has a role to play there. But we live in a dynamic world, and there are only going to be new and different problems after 2030, and whether if we're so fortunate as to address the current challenges. And given that, I think it's a prudent investment on the part of the foundation to invest in a engine of innovation that exists in on a regional basis, so that people that are proximate to these problems can be actively understanding, designing, and addressing them on a localized basis. So we think that kind of supportive infrastructure existing throughout Global South and connected to Global North is an important sort of infrastructure to have in place, so that we're, as a global community, better equipped to identify and address these issues as they arise. And we think that will also strengthen the economies, to have these companies being founded and started and thriving in different geographies throughout the world.
Great, thank you for that, Maggie. One question from the audience for the entrepreneurs. Do you host internships? How might students support social ventures directly if they want to get involved? Or does anyone within, for instance, University of Toronto's Center for or CGen program, do they recruit internships to get involved, interns to get involved?
It depends on the project. For example, our company is rather new, and at the moment we're only 3 people, so I don't really have any internships. We have had some students that have worked in the lab, and they've had more of a role where they are assigned to help out the project, and they're generally like doing they're generally working at U of T in their undergrad, and they will work, say, during the summer for 4 months in the lab, and they actually get a good amount of exposure just due to the like workflow. They'll often end up helping everyone a little bit on each project, so they get sort of a wide experience with a lot of projects in different areas, and I feel like that's really good for them. But I don't think there's anything that's specific, like a single project paid internship position at the moment. But there's definitely like a broad like summer term that we've done a couple times, which has been really helpful for the students who have been interested.
Shilpa, did you have any additional insights there?
Yes, so we are currently looking for interns for cloud solutions development. So anyone in the audience, so if they have experience in that, we would, so we would be posting the same on internship and internshala as well. So these are the 2 sites. So I think they can apply to our organization, and on our website there is a contact link. You can anyways apply for internship on a round year basis. If we find interesting candidates, we would love to engage them in our ongoing projects. So we do come up with structured internships, but also, if there are interesting candidates, we definitely work with them otherwise as well.
Great, thank you for that, Shilpa. We're actually almost at time, so I'm gonna ask one more question from the audience. When working on social entrepreneur projects, the challenges for a particular area, that is any country, what needs need to be considered or factored? Are there any cultural, economic, or social considerations that you consider in the design process?
Yes, of course. I mean, in the design so if you see the human factors itself, I mean, they would change from, country to country, how people are used to. So if you're designing something for paramedic versus you're designing something, if you're targeting your device to be very easy to use, for example, when we were starting the design process, it had to be not for the paramedic also, it had to be at a level lower than that in terms of skill. So we had to design it in a way that it's so easy for the person to use. So there are factors. If the availability of paramedic staff is is there, then you will design it from that level. But if the paramedic staff itself is not available, then you have to design it for a lay person to use this device. So it matters, I mean, from the use perspective as well.
Austin, did you have any insights there? I know over the years we've had a lot of drip irrigation technologies that have come through the iSHOW portal, and your passive irrigation controller seems quite revolutionary, and with a lot of outside the box thinking. Like what kind of inspired you to pursue that design? Were there any cultural or social or economic factors that you kind of incorporate into that design process?
Oh yeah, for sure. In the area we're working, you have to definitely have a robust design, because the farmers, if something doesn't work or it's all like prone to breaking or they don't really understand the technology, they're just not going to use it. And it also has to like they have to basically see the benefit as well, right? So when you install this controller and everything, they should be able to see the water efficiency, like, oh, like it's growing crops and I still have this amount of water left. Like you have to basically prove to them it's like a robust, like good solution, and then it can actually benefit them in the long run. So I feel like those were the key things, like working with that community, especially with language barriers as well, just explaining how to use the design. We're looking into making like a pamphlet and videos, just so it's easier to understand. It's not the hardest thing in the world to like install, but it's still, if you don't do it properly, it won't perform adequately. So again, it's just sort of like working with the community, understanding it, and realizing that this will also change in just different communities around Nicaragua, as well as even like different countries around the globe, right? So if I'm working with Nicaragua, it may be certain factors that are key factors for them, and then it may change if I want to implement this in, say, like a country in, yeah, like Southeast Asia, like the Philippines or something. So it does it does definitely play a key role, and especially with the materials and manufacturing side of it as well. If you're trying to produce it locally, you really have to work with those local manufacturers to make sure they, one, have the parts, two, it's like they can source them and have the right sizes, and that everything fits together properly.
Great, thank you for those insights, Austin. We are at time, so I do want to thank Maggie Flanagan, Shilpa Malik, and Austin McLean for their insights and guidance to early career and engineering students if they're going to be pursuing social entrepreneurship down the line. Certainly appreciate your time and consideration today. Lastly, I just want to remind everyone to be on the lookout for the iSHOW 2021 call for applications, which should be coming in January. And I also want to invite all of you to our Impact Engineered virtual event, December 3rd and 4th. Impact Engineered is a networking experience with keynote addresses, panel discussions, and it's essentially a celebration focusing on the role engineers like you play in sustainable development and advancing disruptive technologies. So you can register at impact-engineer.org, and please feel free to reach out to me directly at creelj@asme.org if you have any specific questions. So thank you to our panelists, thank you to our participants, and we certainly appreciate your time and knowledge today. Thank you very much.